There we go. We got some pre-roll. Good afternoon, ACP. I'm your host, Stephen Yamada with OETC, and welcome to Technology Levies, the process of passing key funding for Washington districts. Before we get started, a few bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can either put them in chat and we'll get them at the end, or maybe they'll answer them in line during the session. And then Chris and Mark have also said that they're willing to call on people. If you raise your hand, you can use the sidebar to raise your hand, and we'll bring you to the stage to ask your question as well. With that out of the way, I would like to introduce our speakers. Today we have Mark Elliott, CIO at Olympia School District, and Chris Bailey, Technology Director at Edmonds School District. Mark, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. This presentation's been kind of a long time coming. Chris, was it a couple of years ago that there was a thread on the ACPE mail forum, basically, that was talking about tech levies, and you and I were kind of chiming in, and then it was decided that we would do a presentation, kind of a Zoom, just open to people. So we sort of did this already a couple of years ago. And then we were going to present at the conference this last year, and then obviously that didn't happen. So we're a couple years out from when we even started talking about this. But we're here, and we're here to share some of that same information, kind of do a second run on this, since Chris and I kind of did it together before. And for me in particular, it's very timely because we are going to start planning our next tech levy this summer. So this has been a really great opportunity for us to go through that process, at least to rethink the different steps, at least that I can share with you from an Olympia standpoint. So just a little bit about me, Mark Elliott. You may have seen me at ACPE a number of times. I think this year would have been number 16 for me. It's been a long time. I'm in the Olympia School District, the metro area of Olympia. We have around 10,000 students in 19 schools, and I will just be totally honest. We passed our last tech levy over 70%. So I think other districts have different struggles at passing measures like this. But a lot of the key fundamental pieces are the same. So I'll let Chris go.
Thanks, Mark. Chris Bailey, Technology Director for the Edmonds School District. I think my first ACPE was 2008, so you got me beat by a bit, Mark. 20,000 students in Edmonds, 32 schools, and I think our last levy passed about 55, 56% right in there. So,
yeah, that's about the numbers we saw in Bethel, kind of the mid 50s when I was in the Bethel district for a while. So anyway, we had a few questions in here, and please ask questions, raise hands. Happy to engage in some of those discussions whenever. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with the tech levy planning process or what a tech levy is, it is a capital levy. So again, we generally hear capital things are for bonds, but this is a 50% capital levy. And when it comes to technology items, typically capital funds can't be used to do replacement items or things like that. But with technology, it can. And technology capital funds can also be utilized for staffing that is directly related to any of the projects or initiatives that you run through your levy, your technology levy. And we'll probably talk about some of those because I'm sure that Chris and I have very different looking technology levies. Yeah, and so we have a few bullet points here. I was trying to find some of the answers to some of these questions because I'm not entirely sure, but I don't know exactly what the cap is for how much money we can ask for from our community. There is a really good, there's two publications, WASBO and OSPI have accounting handbooks that are out there that describe capital levies and the types of things that can be done with those capital levies, as well as what technology kind of exemptions there are that typically aren't there with bonds or other capital related funds and projects. So if you're ever interested in kind of getting some of those details, I would head to those handbooks and take a look. Chris, you want to jump in on anything with that?
Sure. I think thinking about the planning cycle as a kind of a continuum, we passed our last technology levy in February of 2020, so just before the closures of everything began, and we'll probably begin the process of planning for our next tech levy in about 18 months. So that gives us about that long, 18 months, maybe a bit more than that, to define what the tech levy is going to be asking for, to build a case for the needs that we have in the system, and then to get the board adoption for the initiative that will be put to the voters. So Mark, you discussed that you're going to be running a levy fairly soon. So talk about that, how that timeline fits for you in the Olympic
We're the
planning.
same as you. We run in February and hopefully get it passed. The reason we run in February is, and we do this for our, well, it was M&O. It's now enhancement levy. I'm not sure. So we don't run them. First of all, we don't run our levies at the same time. So we offset our M&O, I'll just use that as the term now, and our technology levy by 2 years. So it's every 2 years we're running a levy, and then we run a bond when we need to run a bond. So we offset that way because we don't want to run 2 levies at the same time. We think that can be a bit much of an ask from our community at one particular time and look bad. We also run in February because if we don't get it passed in February, we have another chance that year to rerun. So picking your timing is incredibly important if you are worried about a failure. So that's why, and I'm sure that's probably why Chris and Edmonds probably do it the same way too.
Exactly. It is fair to note, though, that I believe it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago that the state scaled back the number of special elections that are run each year. So it makes it much more challenging if you fail in February to get your paperwork processed and everything, get a new levy plan approved by the board in order to run before the August election date. So it's not as easy as it used to be, but definitely something to keep in mind.
Right. So I wanted to share our current technology levy that we're operating under. So it's our 2018 to 2023 tech levy. And I wanted to share this for a perspective of how we planned our particular levy and out, because in Olympia, the tech levy basically funds almost 100% of technology operations, both operations and instructional. That includes salaries. So your levy may not be the same if you're considering one. Let me do this real quick.
Well, Mark's doing that. I'll just share that in Edmonds, we have a different approach to the staffing that can be levy funded. We try to limit the levy funding positions to those that are actively implementing levy funded projects. So different perspectives in different districts, and you'll find that across the state.
Yep. So we broke our tech levy into 3 pieces. We have an instructional piece, an operational piece, and then we have support, which is our salaries. And so from there, we don't get super duper specific in this particular document, but this is our budgetary layout for those 4 years. So in our instructional area, we have mobile devices, which was our 1-to-1. That has since changed with the pandemic. Our implementation support is PD for our teachers, computers for other locations, classroom display systems, which are either projectors or flat panels and associated document cameras, so on and so forth. Down here we have our budgetary items for infrastructure, things along those lines, and then our instructional and operational staffing and salaries are here as well. The reason I show this, though, outside of the structure of how we built this levy, it will come back in that a number of these items, both in the instructional and the operational area, are replacement cycle items. So these are items that we established with my staff and other staff in the district what an appropriate replacement cycle would be for those items. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into some of the next sessions. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I
see cumulative training there, Mark. We need to chat about that sometime offline.
Yeah, remember when this document was made and we were all going to be moving to cumulative back
absolutely.
Then, right?
You got it. I'm just going to share on the other link that was on the slide presentation. Will take you to this document, which is a slide presentation that we use to describe what the capital levy will fund in Edmonds. This was a board presentation document. So if you bounce through that, you'll see our different projects, what amount of funding we provided to each project as well. And I just wanted to represent our project in a different way from Mark. We've got a similar budget spreadsheet, actually very similar, but I thought it'd be valuable for you all to see another way that that's presented. And that was, again, for our school board and our community. So.
Awesome. Trying to find where we are here.
Yeah, I'm just bouncing back to the other one.
Perfect. All right. So something that I brought up before, and when I was in Bethel and in Olympia, we did kind of the same thing, but we sort of themed our technology levy to incorporate some other pieces. And I know up north, it seems like some of you do technology and transportation levies. We down here have tended to theme our technology levy as a tech and safety levy. And so there are certain safety components that are built into this tech levy as well. But when you start your initial planning for a tech levy, you do think about, do you need to theme it? Does the theme help sell it to your community? That's a big piece of it. And not that safety is just a term that you use just to help sell it and make it seem more important. It is a very important piece. And this is a great way to get some of those technological safety pieces in place. So for us, now that we're looking at renewing the first tech levy that I was responsible for creating and ushering through here in Olympia, we're looking at renewing that. And the very first thing that we're at least looking at are, what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that rise to the top and have to be there at the very outset of this process? And for us in Olympia, it's those replacement cycle items. It took a while to even get those replacement cycles in. So we have replacement cycles for staff laptops, for student laptops, for display systems in classrooms, switches, servers, battery backup systems, all those things. And those are just requirements at this point in time. We don't get to just look the other way. So those go for us to the very top of the list.
Yeah, we're the same way. We have cycles for everything, and we consider them the same. They're non-negotiables. And then we begin the conversation of, well, what should we be doing different this levy that we've not done before, or that we want to do differently moving forward? And that's what I think a lot of the safety-related items have been in the last levy or two. They weren't a consideration for us prior to 2012 or even 2016, but absolutely a kind of key component to our levies now. I think the other piece I wanted to say on the theming, that I think, while you said it, it's not a reason to address or to include safety. I think it does resonate with the community. Another thing that we've tried to be intentional about in order to help our levies resonate with the community is to ensure that we're not overlooking a campus or overlooking a department or a group. We try to ensure that there's something in it for everyone, because that's what's going to help each community member that's a voter to see that there's some good that will come to them or to a program that matters to them. So another way to help ensure that the levy plan will resonate with the community.
Yep. And that we'll talk about a little bit in an upcoming slide with some of those pieces. Now, one of the nice things about running it as a tech and safety levy, outside of those kind of non-negotiable replacement cycle items for us, we then do special projects, right? So this is a kind of a special project levy as well. And as an example, a special project in our last, this tech levy that we're in right now that was along the lines of safety was for our kindergarten and primary school students on their buses. We implemented and paid for a swipe card system to track the students when they get on and off the buses. So technology related, also safety related, also transportation related. In fact, we did out of this levy a full replacement of all bus and transportation fleet radios. That doesn't really fall under my department. It does a little bit, but it's not all about necessarily you either. It is, what are the needs for the district? One I can tell you that will be coming up in our next tech levy is we're going to be fully replacing all intrusion alarms across the district with an upgraded solution that's unified. Because I'm sure if you have multiple schools in your district, you probably have multiple intrusion systems in your district. So it's a great opportunity to standardize and replace antiquated gear. Probably the biggest special item we did out of this last tech levy for Olympia, and we'll actually have to roll to the next one, is we have standardized on the single wire IP clock bell speaker system. And so that's paying for a complete standardization across our school district, which is thankfully not a replacement cycle type of thing, but it is quite expensive.
I think the only other thing I want to add on this is that some of our cycles are 4 years, meaning we'll have an item in every single levy, and others aren't as frequent. So they'll be addressed every 8 years or maybe even every 12 years. So it might be that it's not a cycle, but it's a cycle that doesn't necessarily need to be accommodated for within each tech levy plan. So
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk about the stakeholders.
Go for it.
So in Edmonds, we typically start our levy planning process by establishing a committee that we call the Technology Levy Task Force. And we have a tech advisory committee that meets regularly. The task force that plans the levy includes those members, but essentially we swell it about 3 times the size of the normal ranks. It includes teachers, administrators, administrative staff at the central office, and community members. Essentially what we're doing with that group is trying to figure out what those changes that we want to make over our previous levy plan were. What are the things that maybe didn't work as well as we thought they would, or things that we think we can do a better job addressing with new technologies? And so in a lot of ways, it starts as the technology and instructional technology teams presenting to this body what we think those things might be, getting them thinking, and then ultimately the output of the conversation, the kind of push and pull, is a proposal that we ultimately make to cabinet and then to the school board.
Yep. Same with us. We identified the same group of stakeholders. You can see them on the slide, which then translate into a representative group of them that form a planning committee. I think ours was around 28 people for this last group. Clearly we had more staff in our committee than we had community members, but we definitely still had the voice. Gavin had a question: how has or will that community involvement change in the new remote situation? I think that there's a broader question there, and part of that is happening as we speak, and this may resonate with some of you as well. What we're getting from our community more than anything is that there are, at least of our 10,000 students, potentially up to 600 students who don't want to come back. And they don't want to go to our traditional online offering, academy. They want the remote instruction they got throughout this pandemic. So we are forming a second online school right now to account for that desired type of instruction. And what hasn't even been discussed is what are the needs of that school outside of what we already provide that may need to be part of a tech levy. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Gavin? Maybe we can bring Gavin up to ask that question.
Hey, Gavin, if you want to engage, you can raise your hand and we can get you promoted to be able to chat with us. I think that in this remote situation, the most recent levy that we ran was a couple of weeks back now, and we leveraged the tools that are at our disposal every day in order to engage with the community stakeholders, in order to ensure that the plan that we put forth to the voters was one that made sense. But was there more you wanted to share?
Yeah, no, I like what you had to say, especially about the 600 kids that are interested in more of the remote learning and who apparently thrived with the product that they were getting. I think there's a lot to that question. We're just now sort of working through about maybe our 5th or 6th meeting of our TAC committee, which is all the community involvement, and I'm a part of that group. And I think I haven't really been a part of past tech levies, but because we have this all happening virtually with a pretty strong platform to kind of collect, the group's thinking and notes and ideas, I think we've seen a huge uptick in terms of the number of community members that initially want to be a part of this. And so it was pretty wide open. That number is slowly kind of dwindled as we've gotten further and further along, and it might fluctuate as we go.
Oh, Gavin, we kind of lost you there.
I will say
I think I know where he was going with that,
Go
and I'll certainly address this. I'm going to take him off the stage here real quick, Chris. Oh, there's gone. If you could go to the next slide, that would be awesome. So when we put our tech levy together in Olympia, again, it was representative of the aforementioned stakeholders, and at least for us, the purpose was to take a draft, basically baseline budget and proposal that I put together with my staff through cabinet, talking to other departments to determine their needs, if there's anything that needs to be part of this, because again, this is not your technology levy. This is the district's technology levy, which should include and should have input from anybody, any department that feels that there's something that would benefit them that should be discussed and considered. And so when we put together our committee, we pulled staff from our TAC as well, our Tech Advisory Committee. But then I approached principals and said, you know, what community, parents, students do you think would be a good fit for this committee as well? So we actually invited both of our student school board representatives. We have 2 school board student representatives to this. We got a few parents, but we didn't leave it wide open. And that can just lead to problems if it's kind of an open invitation. You know, did we have 100% attendance from those community members? No. But we did have the invitations out to about 6 of them in that committee of 28. So, yeah. So I want to hop into this piece a little bit deeper, because this was the real meat of what we did for our levy work. After we built that kind of bare bones draft proposal that I then took to the committee, we basically, at least in Olympia, took each of those chunked items, and then I put together what we called basic, proficient, and exemplary options for those items. And then as a group in each meeting, we sat and looked at each one of those line items and discussed, here's the current prices. I was getting current prices to the day, if at all possible, trying to get kind of estimation quotes from vendors for certain things. And then we talked about those items, and then we looked at, you know, is the middle of the road for this okay? And I'll share this with you now, if I can hop in here, Chris, real quick. So this is just a quick example of an agenda that I put together for one of our meetings. Get this loaded up here. So this one was on the 19th of September in 2017. We just reviewed kind of the stuff we looked at the previous meeting. And then I gave them a heads up that we weren't going to try and ram through everything, but these are the items that we're going to look at and discuss. And in some cases, here's a first look at something that we're going to discuss, and then we know we're going to have another meeting to come back to, because we did ask them to go back to their staff to have discussions about what was important. So this person was supposed to represent the voice of their building and their constituents. And I'm just kind of running my way through this kind of quickly. So a little framing as to why a tech levy is important. We talked about the ISTE standards a little bit. We shared all the ISTE standards with the parents that were on the group, the students, everybody. And this was sort of the process we went through. It's probably a bad one. Let's see. Here's a decent look at display systems. So this was our, for reference sake, this was the amount of money that was set aside for display systems in the previous tech levy, and this was my proposal moving into this one. And as a group, I just gave them information about how much our current standard costs, what's this look like, for document cameras, how much does it cost to do new wiring in those spaces, and let's see. There's another example of this. I grabbed a bad one here. Sorry. But then when it came time to make a decision on this, we typically said, where was that again? This is like a low level amount, a middle of the line amount, and like a Cadillac Premier amount. And for the most part, our groups settled on the middle of the road. But in a couple of instances after discussion, they settled on what was a distinguished option. And I will share that with you real quick. Sorry to hog it here, Chris. So this is an example of all of our instructional things and the decisions that were made. So student mobile devices is a good example. Over the course of 4 years, how much money did we want to spend for Chromebooks or an optional iPad as the committee looked at? And so these were the 3 different options we looked at, which they dropped into the middle, which was a touch Chromebook, but not an iPad device. So these were discussions that happened through all of these different pieces. The one that I thought was really interesting was this assistive adaptive. So we have a special budget for our assistive and adaptive technology items. We were recommending that these numbers were adjusted. It be $60,000. They wanted to go $120,000. And then the group came back at another meeting and said, we want this to be $800,000 for our assistive and adaptive so that those kids have whatever they need, whenever they need it, which has honestly turned out to be way too much money. They can't, we don't get that much demand for it. But that was the power of this committee, was they were able to look at these items and make some really interesting observations and decisions on a recommendation for them. So again, this was kind of our instructional side of things and where we landed on that spectrum of basic, proficient, or distinguished, and what we took to cabinet and then the board. All right, Chris, I've been hogging here. So
no, you've been doing great. I think along the lines of having several different scenarios, I think it's fair to mention as well that we don't often get to decide how much money we're going to ultimately ask our voters for, because we've been doing tech levies for some time in Edmonds. I think in our current strand, we've run them since 2004, every 4 years, and passed consistently since then, which is great. But the amount of money that we're asking our voters for is often dictated by the economy at the time. So let me say a bit more about that. We ran a levy in 2020, and that levy was run for almost 50% more than the levy that was run in 2016. And the result of that levy will still be a reduction in tax rate per assessed valuation of a home. Back in 2008, and I believe again in 2012, we were not able to maintain the same amount of income or the same amount of levy revenue at the same tax rate. So we presented several options to the district's leadership at the time. Do we want to increase taxes and increase the amount of revenue, or maintain a flat amount of spending, amount of levy funding, or reduce? And we were asked to provide 3 different scenarios. Ultimately, we decided to maintain a flat collection, and that's not a decision that was in our control, but we were fortunate in 2020 that with the economy being what it was and the growth in our area, that we were able to substantially increase the amount of money that we're collecting without a tax increase, without a tax rate increase to our voters, which was an objective of our school board. So again, not something that was in our control, but absolutely something that has an impact on the plan that we put together.
Yep. And you have to keep an eye on those things too, because ours was running right up against the new levy rules for your enhancement levy. And so we were getting that cut with all the new decisions made around levies and all those fun things and the levy cliff. And that all seems to have gone to the wayside in light of our last year and a half. But we actually, we doubled our levy. We doubled our tech levy because we could. And it still kept us within our total collection amount that we had been collecting from our taxpayers in the past, because we got cut so heavily on our enhancement levy in Olympia. And I'm sure you've heard this a ton in Washington, with the Oh, it's been so long now. Chris, what was the money
McCleary.
you guys got for, did you guys get the extra money for staffing?
From McCleary?
Yeah,
Yes.
because we got nothing. we got $0 from the McCleary decision for extra staffing. I think we were the only school district that touches I-5 and the Puget Sound, both that didn't get anything. And that hurt. That hurt a lot because of how severely we got cut to that $1.50 per student. So we really made up for it with the tech levy, and we ended up, like I said, a little over doubling it to make up for some of those deficits. But it's all stuff we wanted to do with technology anyway, so it was good. Anyway, all right. Again, I've been talking too much. Go ahead, Chris.
No worries. So talking about community support, I think something that's important to keep in mind is that there are very strict rules around what a staff member can do while they're working related to promotion of a technology or of any initiative. We make it clear when we're communicating with staff and principals and teachers that they are absolutely allowed to share information about an initiative, but that is the line that they cannot cross. If they're doing anything more than sharing information, factual information that someone could read in a pamphlet, then they're doing more than they should be doing from a legal perspective. They can't be telling people how to vote. They can't be telling them to make sure that they vote yes. They can tell them all the factual information that they want, and that's the extent to which they can promote information awareness, if you will. That said, there are some things that school districts can do and that the community can do to help get the support out there. In Edmonds, we have a community organization, Citizens for Schools, that champions each of the district's initiatives. It's not connected to the school district in any way. It does have a lot of volunteerism within the school district community. So I think that is how the district contributes to the citizens group's efforts, but that's really the extent of it. They're otherwise completely separate organizations. And that group does phone banking, reaching out to voters that we know have been supportive in the past. It sends out mailers and it does other things in order to get that yes vote out there. Again, separate from the school district, but it does, there are ways that staff can volunteer. It does reach out to PTAs for volunteer opportunities through that as well. So.
And we're slightly different. I know it was a total humble brag that I did at the beginning, and I apologize for that. We have a pretty high passage rate in Olympia, but I'll juxtapose that to Bethel, where I came from, where we struggled. I mean, my second year teaching, we had a double levy failure. And that was really, really ugly. And so we had to do a lot of the same stuff, a lot of phone banking, a lot of canvassing. Thankfully, we stopped knocking on doors because that got kind of unsafe, especially in the Spanaway area. But, it was a struggle. Again, not so much here. But like Edmonds, we have a community support organization that's made up of parents and business owners. In fact, the mayor is a member of that group and chaired the last tech levy, which was wonderful. And one thing that we did it the year that my last year in Bethel, when we got the first tech levy passed there, and we do it here. I reached out to our mass notification vendor and said, hey, will you do a separate contract with our citizens advisory group? And that way it's out of our hands. That's nothing to do with us, but they know it has something to do with us. So they negotiated a separate contract with them for a certain number of robocalls, basically, to go out on behalf of the citizens advisory group and promote the levy. Because we don't phone bank in Olympia, that just doesn't really happen here. But we did send out a couple automated calls with the information you can get that's publicly available for the voters in your area. And that was a lot easier. I mean, I've done the phone banking in Bethel a lot. Nobody answers the phone anymore anyway.
It's true. A very small subset of our population has landlines anymore, and they often don't answer the phone anyway. So yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge.
I don't miss phone banking whatsoever. And then beyond that, we have a number of signs, and something that we try to do, because we reuse the signs for our regular levy with the tech levy, we try to get matching signs with our neighboring school districts. Because when they're running levies and we're running levies kind of at the same time, if everybody's got matching signs, it just looks like you're canvassing a bigger area, and it helps each other, right? So it just is, it's a strategy that we've been using for a little while, and then we get out and put those signs in place. I know that there are companies out there that specialize in helping school districts get tough bonds and levies passed, places that have problems with that. I believe Tacoma used a group, and Peninsula might have used a group as well, but I don't think they're in business anymore. But they really specialized in that help. So if you're in a district that has been maybe a little bit fearful of running a levy because you believe it won't get passed, or you have a history of kind of a bad experience with trying to get things passed, there are groups out there that specialize in helping your district get through that process. And then basically, if you do get it passed, the very best thing and the only thing you should be doing is making good on all the promises that you made. Because if you don't, good luck getting another one passed. I mean, especially if you can get it done under budget is an amazing thing. Or you can supply, not flashy, but highly visible safety improvements to your sites, things that are really attractive to your community and show that you were thoughtful in how you spent their funds, in protecting students and providing information and equipment to students. And in light of this whole pandemic, I will say that our tech levy got us through this with, I'm not going to say no effort, because I think we all were working our tails off and it was very stressful for quite some time. But if any of you in the audience don't have a tech levy, I really feel for you through this whole last year. We were already one-to-one with all of our secondary students through our tech levy, and we were just planning to go one-to-one with our elementary as carts and classrooms. But because we had the funds available, we did a distribution out of our tech warehouse and help desk here to all elementary students. They just came and we had a pickup process done. And we were one-to-one in a month and a half, I would say, across the board. And the other really nice thing, when we talked to our school board about this in a school board study session, one school board member, this was fantastic and it was almost foresight. She said, "This looks great. I am not going to vote yes on this unless you put extra money in there for students who need Wi-Fi at home." And she said, "And it needs to be a lot of money." And so we ended up putting an annual $150,000 into our budget to provide access to students who either don't have or have weak access. So we already had 50 hotspots in place before the pandemic hit. And then with those funds, we were able to snatch up another 50, and we've since gone to like 250 of them. But we had those going right off the bat. So that was a really helpful thing. So again, our tech levy really gave us a lot of flexibility and provided us some opportunity to purchase where we may not have purchased as the pandemic kind of kicked off.
Yeah, I think I'd echo what you said, that it didn't make the job easy, but it put us in a great position to accommodate the needs that came up that we weren't really planning for. I think the other thing I wanted to say regarding the promises is I would encourage you to not be afraid to be a bit ambiguous in what the school board sees and what the voters are approving. And what I mean by that is you don't need to describe exactly what devices that you're going to be providing and the exact quantity that you're going to be providing. If you bounce back in our presentation to the slides that I shared, that is more detail than the board actually saw on the day that they voted to run the tech levy. And it provided a dollar amount for student learning devices. It didn't say in the initiative how much we were going to spend for each grade level. It didn't say what type of device we were going to be providing. And that's intentional because, frankly, we don't know what devices are going to be around next year, let alone 4 or 5 years down the road when this levy is still going to be funding us. So as much as we can be ambiguous, but also still be specific enough that we're going to get the support that we need, both within the organization and within the community, those are the commitments that we want to make. Those are the things we want to be able to be held accountable to for our voters, so that we can remind them that we've done what we said we were going to do, and the next time around they'll vote on our history of success and continue to support us. So
Yep. Yep. Yeah, very similar. We outlined a dollar amount per device, or in the case of our display systems for classrooms, we said it'll be, this is the dollar amount we're setting aside per classroom, which would include the display device, the document camera, and any wiring, mounting, any of that stuff. And I think it's the responsible thing to be conservative when you put those budgetary pieces together. Conservative might not have been the right word, but highball it, right? So go with the prices you get, but be realistic about what those prices may look like in the future, especially when it's coming to wiring or any labor, because in the middle of this is when L&I changed their I can't think today. I'm sorry, tired, but it was on the tip.
And I know we plan for growth for our staff salaries. We also plan for the unknown. Within each Chromebook purchase, for example, we have a contingency that we use for things like wiring of carts, random supplies that we don't know exactly what they're going to be. So absolutely baking in those opportunities to address needs that you don't necessarily know about.
Yeah, and thanks, Keith. Prevailing wage was the term I was reaching for in my brain, because prevailing wage went way up in the last couple of years. So, you just don't know where those things are going to land. But on the plus side of that, you can end up, not that you're trying to pad a budget or anything, but you have to be realistic about it. But if you can come in under budget, then those are funds that can be used for another project. And it just is, it's a nice thing to be able to say, we accomplished all of these tasks under budget. I mean, that's just a huge selling point. So.
Absolutely.
Well, that was our presentation. I know that Chris and I, when we did this over Zoom a couple of years ago, it was a discussion. So this was kind of weird for me. I don't know about for you, Chris, because we talked our way through that other one with other people. And I really want to hear you and your thoughts. And I'm sure that we'll learn from you as well, because we're.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have something to add about your experience running Levy, we'd love to hear that. If you have questions for us or for the group, we'd love to help with those too. So
yeah, just raise your hand and we'll bring you up here and we'll do this. Well, Chris, it's a quiet group.
There you go. Oh, let's see. Did we talk about deciding to go with a 4-year levy, 2, 4, or 6 years? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think each district has kind of different philosophies about that. I'm a voter and a parent in Everett School District, and they run a 6-year tech levy. Otherwise, it's very similar to what we do in Edmonds with a 4-year tech levy. Essentially, their last levy looked about 50% larger than ours, and it covered 2 more years. So I think from my perspective, that's a business office partnership decision. But if I went to our business office and said, hey, let's switch it to 6 years, they'd probably just say no. And I need to have a pretty good reason for why we should make a change. Frankly, I really am happy with the 4-year cycle on a lot of our equipment. And so it's very logical to me. It makes a lot of sense. But Mark, what about you?
So if I think about it this way, we never discussed a 2 or a 6. It's always been 4. For one of the first reasons I mentioned is it offsets, right? So we have a 4-year enhancement levy and we run them 2 years apart. So it really works well on that schedule. But the other thing about this is I don't even know that I would want to go out 6 years and try and forecast what years 5 and 6 would look like. I mean, things change so quickly with pricing, with supply and models and features that it's almost uncomfortable to go 4. In that 4th year, is it going to even be a similar device to what it is we wanted to go with? Which kind of goes back to Chris's point of be as vague as you possibly can and say, we're going to buy a device that costs $350, which then gives you our community talked about this a lot. It gives you the flexibility to go with whatever the correct device is at the time. instead of locking yourself into something that you name at the very beginning. Also, 2 years. I don't know if I want to do this every 2 years.
It's a lot of work for 2 years worth of money, isn't it?
I mean, you would have the ultimate flexibility with planning, but I think 4 years is a sweet spot for me. We can plan a very large project out over 4 years and really see it from beginning to end. And I think that just works. 6 years scares me.
I think the other challenge with a 6-year levy is if we think that through on a calendar, we run a 6-year levy that's run in 2020, because I'm using Edmonds as an example. So that means that our levy plan has to be to the school board in order to be run in February of 2020 by September of 2019. So back up further, our planning work begins probably September of 2018. The first year of that funding is 2021. And the 6th year of that funding is 2027. So we began levy planning in 2018, and that levy is going to fund us through like 2016, 7, or 2026 or 27. That's daunting. As it is, our timeline for planning is longer than I'd like, knowing that we've got to make those decisions. And I just echoed 4 years makes sense to me. But
Martha, your question, did we gather any input from the community? I know, at least in our case, we sent out student, staff, administrative, and parent surveys. I'll quickly show the student one, and I'll tell you why that was kind of funny. So this was it. Very simple, 3 questions. What's currently in place that should be continued, supported, and grown in your school? What might be introduced that's new, innovative to implement the standards in your school? And we gave the ISTE standards for students at the top. And what might come off the plate to make room for something new? Those are the questions we asked our students and our staff and our families. And we got tons and tons of responses I think we had close to 600 students, 600 or 700 student responses, which was really nice. It was a really high number. But the funny thing about it was the students all wanted us to turn off the filter. They took that opportunity to say, turn off the filter. Just get rid of the filter. We don't want this anymore. It's really a pain. So, that is part of the process of allowing open-ended questions with students. They'll use it as an opportunity to advocate for whatever it is they want, which was no filter.
Well, at times I've asked myself if the E-rate funding is even worth the filter, the pain that the filters cause, but we're still filtering in Edmonds, so.
Yeah. Yep. So, so we did at least. I don't know, Chris, did you guys do many community?
I know we did a community survey for the 2016, or a student survey, for the 2016 levy. I don't know that we did either in the 2020 levy, aside from engaging with our our technology levy task force, which had some community representation on it.
Gavin was asking a very specific question regarding how we wrote up, at least in Olympia, the project for classroom display systems, Mark's budget overview, and what that encompassed. Yeah, absolutely. So that actually turned out to be, we spec'd out $2,900 per classroom on a 6-year display replacement cycle. And we made it so that, so I'll just be totally honest. When I came into Olympia 7 years ago, there were no replacement cycles for anything. And things were kind of done haphazardly. They just said, we're going to replace this school here at this time for whatever reason. And then there were like 5 different projector models. I don't know why that was the thing either. And so we really took this as an opportunity to standardize and say, it's one model. It's on this schedule. Here's the schedule, so you can all see where you're on the schedule, because schools were accusing the tech department of playing favoritism, because if there's nothing published for a replacement cycle, it's all guesswork for the people, for your constituents on the other side. They're just trying to figure out what your thinking is. So part of the research we did as a committee was, what's the replacement cycle for our classroom display system on those 6 years? Where do the schools fall? And then, like Chris was mentioning, when you be as vague as possible, we said our current projector model, we were doing laser ultra shorts at the time, is about $1,400 a projector. In some spaces, it's a standard mount, so we're going to need to remount those up close, and then that includes cabling. So a mount is X amount. And then we took this opportunity to say, when you do a projector, you also get a new document camera. So it's all a bundle, and it changes all the display options in your classroom at the same time. And so we were doing the Elmo TT12 ID, or I at the time, ID, I think, along with a Casio laser ultra short, and then any associated mounting. And our total for that came to about $2,900 per classroom. We have had to adjust budget since then. But what we specifically said to the committee was, it doesn't necessarily have to be a projector. At some point in time during the life of this levy, it may actually make sense to go to a flat panel in the classroom. I know a lot of people are putting 75-inch in. I just struggle with the size of those for students that are in the back of the room. I happen to have good eyesight. I know people who have terrible eyesight. And, interactive, Gavin, excellent point. Is it time to move to an interactive? So in our final year of this tech levy, we actually just had a long conversation as a department today about moving to interactive flat panels and then making that the standard for our next levy that we go out for. So it gives us the flexibility to go around in there. But that was how we got to our specific dollar amount as a committee, by tallying up all the different pieces that we thought it would cost, including mounting and installation. So that's how we did it.
Interesting. Yeah, our language was kind of the opposite, that we expected to be with a large format display unless there's a unique reason that we needed to do a projector. And we've been doing large format displays kind of incrementally since about 2014. So I think we're at about a third, maybe 50% of our district with a 70-inch display on the wall. And it's met our needs really well. It has resulted in some change in practice. You'll see a lot fewer teachers with a Google slide presentation that's got like 4 paragraphs on it, which is great because we didn't want that to happen anyway. But it definitely is something that does need to be kept in mind if you're going that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions? I really am interested to see where we go after this pandemic is over with our next levy and what the community says they want from us. Our community was very appreciative of the fact that we had equipment ready to go for kids, that we were providing, like as an example, we didn't take advantage of the state's broadband for free reduced families at all, because we had it covered already. And so I'm interested to see where we go with this next. Now that the community has been more involved with us from a technology standpoint. For example, I was receiving emails from parents discussing privacy policies that I have not usually gotten before. And we have lots of very intelligent parents out there that are concerned about their students and their children's privacy. And now that we spent a year entirely online, that really came to the forefront. So I think it's going to be a slightly different conversation this time around. But one thing that it is worth noting is, with a technology levy being a capital levy, typically with bonds and things, you don't do replacement, ongoing costs, maintenance costs, and things like that. You can with technology pieces. So we are able to renew our Schoology license through a tech levy. So, those core pieces we have together as well.
Did you plan for digital curriculum to be paid for out of the technology levy?
Yes, we did.
So we did not plan for any core curriculum to be funded via the tech levy. There was some supplemental curriculum, some of it which was related to core curriculum, and others which were completely different tools or services, but none of our core curriculum is levy funded.
We started with, I think it was like 1.2 million for curriculum, but that also included all of our licensing fees for instructional systems like Schoology, our Nearpod subscription, that kind of stuff. But we put a ton of money in there for our teaching and learning department to basically pull off a curriculum adoption and associated training. And then we got hit with that crazy levy change and budget reductions every single year. So we ended up using a lot of those dollars as technology training to help our staff with some of those bargaining items, I'll say. But there is specifically dollars into our tech levy for a curriculum adoption type of thing. And I mean, I'll say this: we still have an annual in our general fund. There are dollars every year for curriculum adoptions too. The thing that I loved about this was it was specifically to either enhance the curriculum adoption with the technology pieces that may cost extra, or to find something that was entirely digital or online. The other thing that we built into this levy that was new, the one we're currently in, was a STEM TOSA. So we have, in my department, we have 3 tech TOSAs. And then in teaching and learning, there's a number of other content specific coaches, but we built a STEM TOSA into this current tech levy. So, and that doesn't live with me. That actually lives under the teaching and learning department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a new superintendent in Edmonds this year, and he asked me shortly after he came, let's talk about your technology plan. And in the state of Washington, there was a requirement to have a technology plan up until like 2013, and that requirement went away. So the value that was placed, I think, in a lot of districts went away. But a technology levy plan, in a lot of ways, represents how you're going to spend your money and what your crucial, important initiatives are. And so I think one positive benefit of the process that we go through in defining our funding is I know exactly what our vision is for technology, because we've got the 4-year levy plan, which outlines where we want to be in 4 years. So
I can't agree more. Can't agree more. And then just that strong partnership with your curriculum or teaching and learning side of the house, it's so important that you have a resource like Schoology, you have a resource like Nearpod or something like that that's being funded out of your technology levy. I mean, it's great to have those things, but if nobody uses them or knows how to use them, you got to plan for that too. So part of our process has not only been the technology coaches, but how do we fund our teachers for technology specific professional development? So that's been built into our levy as well. So currently, under contract, under our Olympia Education Association contract, teachers get 6 hours a year of self-directed technology professional development. This year with the pandemic, we doubled it and gave them 12, and now they're actually having a hard time trying to figure out how to use that. But those are important things to not overlook either. Is you can buy the fanciest toys and have the greatest stuff, but people need to know how to use it. So what's your plan for getting those tools implemented in a thoughtful way? So we build that in as well. Kyle, you did miss it. I said that we're entirely funded out of our tech levy, my whole department.
And in Edmonds, we do not have any technology department staff that are fully levy funded. There are maybe a half a dozen of us that are partially levy funded. And the mental exercise that we go through is how much of my time will we spend implementing levy funded projects. That's the line that was drawn in the sand in Edmonds. But again, that's a different conversation in each school district. For me, a third of our sysadmins are levy funded. We've got some project coordinators that are partially levy funded, and I'm partially levy funded. We've got a few other staff as well. But knowing that we didn't want to fund support work or ongoing work out of the levy, that resulted in all of our staff in the tech department being partially general and partially capital funded.
Yeah. We made some really good progress in Olympia once I got here at getting our salaries moved back over to the general fund. I was really demanding that and saying this is inappropriate for a tech levy, quite honestly, just kind of like what Chris was saying. Not everything we do is 100% tech levy, associated. And we actually made great progress on that. And then the McCleary decision came and absolutely crippled us. And so it not only went back to the way it was, where we were 100% funding all positions in the tech department, I was having conversations about trying to bring the teacher librarians in. It was like, who can we bring into this tech levy to save their positions if these budget cuts continue to happen the way that they are? So it has been such a nice year to not have that conversation.
Yeah, we went through a similar situation back in 2008 when there was a downturn in the economy. We had planned to increase our instructional technology TOSAs by 2, and instead we needed to save the jobs of the 2 TOSAs that we had by adding them into the tech levy. Certainly not ideal by any means, but in that case, the work they're doing was so clearly tied to the levy funded projects, it was a no-brainer. And it's unfortunate we weren't able to grow the team at the time, but we were able to get through it. So weather the storm when you can, when you have to.
Yeah, Gavin, PD is part of our tech levy funding. I'll even show you. I'll pop that back up here. This, give me 1 second, sorry. This is what, so we have about 670 teachers in our district. And this is our traditional line right here. We call it implementation support. This was our tech PD that we funded for the 6 hours a year. And then we grew that to what we thought would be 12 hours in a year and then potentially 18. But what this actually turned into for the teachers, because let's just be honest, this was a play at how we could offset some bargaining for our teachers too. We still give them 6 hours, but what our district is doing is a technology affidavit. So it's at the end of the year, the teachers basically are saying, I've used technology in this way. And so we use these funds it bailed us, I'll be honest, it bailed us out of the last teacher bargain. So yeah, but again, this is our line right here. Implementation support are the dollars we set aside just specifically for certificated teacher professional development.
There are a lot of complexities to the equation, and that's one of them. Anytime bargaining is involved, it gets messy. But
well,
yeah,
and to start with a number and say it's worth this many hours, and then next year we're going to either increase that number, but we have to also account for cost of living and what we think the bargain pay raises will be. Is it just IPD? Do we think they're going to get more than IPD? So you're playing a fortune-telling game as you try to work through anything that's related to salary. It's an educated guess, really.
And you're doing that for a handful of hours for every certificated staff member. Right. And we're not providing levy funded hours to our cert staff in that way, but we do have a pretty sizable instructional coaching team that's going to grow a bit with the 2020 tech levy. So we go through a similar exercise where we're trying to predict what's the percentage of growth each year. And it's more complex than that as well, because the average salary for a cert staff member is very different from the high and the low for that team, right? So it really depends on who you have on staff. I know at one point in time, we had two team members in that group that had doctorates, and so they were maxed out. And the average is probably $35,000, $40,000 below maxed out, and they were there for 4 years. So if you do the math, we had to increase the budget by a couple $100,000 to accommodate for the experience and the compensation that warranted.
Well, and who are your TOSAs usually? Your TOSAs are senior teachers who are respected by everybody in the district, and they are not on the bottom of your pay scale.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are typically the more expensive teachers, and that's who you want, right? That is absolutely who you want. But that it just is kind of a factor.
Yeah, I guess I would argue that, like everything, having a diverse team is the best thing. So having a mix of experiences, people that are really green as far as having recent training at the college level, to me, that's really valuable for that group, because those most experienced teachers haven't been in that classroom setting in 30 years. So they don't know what our new teachers are actually hearing. So yeah, I'll just say.
So 2 positions we did bring in with this last one that I thought have been absolute lifesavers. We brought in MDM specialist, wireless specialist. So I have a specialized technician position. It's a union position that his job is to monitor and tune our wireless, and then he handles all of our MDM and Google management console for our mobile devices. That has been awesome. To have somebody who is dedicated to the wireless has just been a terrific technician to have. And then I think it's been a trend that a lot of us have gone towards in the last couple of years. We hired a security technician. So essentially somebody who works on the low voltage kind of side of things. So they work with the cameras, the doors, card access systems, the IP bell clock speakers, and then we got them on the phones now too. So those have been 2 really nice operational additions that we've added that have just really been less support calls, and waiting. All right, Chris, how long are we supposed to go for?
I think we had until 5:15.
Oh, okay.
So if there are any other questions, I did just change sharing on the slide presentation. Thanks to those of you that sent me a note.
All right.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. You know where to find us. We'll be on Discord and the ACPE email group and whatnot as well. So reach out if you have other questions we can help with.
And we'll see you next year.
Hopefully
In person. You got it. We'll make it happen.
Mark, Chris, thanks so much for your time. Everyone else, have a good rest of ACP.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone.